So I'll call the meeting to order, and we will start. Okay, colleagues, the 9th meeting of City Council has been called to order. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. We acknowledge all of the treaties that are specific to this area: the Two-Row Wampum Belt Treaty of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Silver Covenant Chain, the Beaver Hunting Grounds of the Haudenosaunee-Nanfan Treaty of 1701, the McKee Treaty of 1790, the London Township Treaty of 1796, the Huron Tract Treaty of 1827 with the Anishinaabe, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. The 3 Indigenous nations that are neighbors to Lennon are the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation, who all continue to live as sovereign nations with individual and unique languages, cultures, and customs. Further, the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact Council Agenda at london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. With that, I want to invite our National Anthem singer forward in a moment. Let me just do the introduction first. 26-year-old Amanda Movio bends an old soulful sound into the modern world. Singing and writing from her youngest years, she grew up knowing that she was meant to sing. Amanda is a fast-rising star with over 300,000 streams in 6 months between 4 singles and listeners in over 130 countries. Her voice has been compared to legends like Billie Holiday, Amy Winehouse, and Erykah Badu. But she continues to pave her lane while she experiments with different sounds and styles. Please join me in welcoming Amanda Movio, who will now perform the national anthem for us. And please rise.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land, glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Colleagues, I'll look for disclosures of pecuniary interest for this meeting. Okay, seeing none, recognitions. I'm going to start the recognitions by going to Councillor Pelosa first.
Thank you. You'll see as well in the corporate services report, recognizing National Day of Awareness for Missing and Emergent Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirit people. An official proclamation is coming, but recognizing that day and its importance to our community and moving towards reconciliation as well. This year will be the first year that the City of London will have a display as well in their front window here, as well as a display at Dearness Home, and encouraging colleagues to find a red dress pin or to think of that day and to participate as your schedules allow in some community events that are happening, and for everyone to take the time to become aware of the disproportion of missing and murdered women and girls and Two-Spirit people throughout the country and the intergenerational effects it has on people in the healing. So just thank you to colleagues for supporting this when it comes forward at corporate services and for your support of urban Indigenous and our Indigenous neighbors.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a recognition, and to do so, I want to share that I received a letter from the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. And the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators recognize the number of years of full-time paid employment in municipal governments in a management capacity, which means someone who is either served as a CAO or city manager or reported directly to the CAO and city manager. So they may have worked for longer, but this is their work at the senior level, and I've been informed that our city manager, Lynn Livingston, has reached the 10-year mark, serving in the highest capacities of our organization. And so I would like council to join me in congratulating her on this milestone and thanking her for the incredible work that her and her team does for us each and every day. So 10 more to go, right? No. We could only wish. We're happy to have you as long as you'd like. Moving on to the agenda, there are no review of confidential matters to be considered in public. That brings us to council in closed session. Colleagues will see a number of the items listed on the public agenda. There's nothing additional on the added, right? Okay. So there's nothing additional than what's on the public agenda. All of the reasons are there. I'll look for a motion to move into closed session. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Any discussion on moving into closed session? Seeing none? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Councillor Cuddy. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, so we'll move into closed session. For those in the gallery, please take your items with you. When we're completed closed session, you'll be able to come back in to review the public session when we return to that format.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're back in public session. We move on to item 5, which is confirmation and signing of the minutes from previous meetings. We have the 8th meeting held on April 4th. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the minutes there. Moved by Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Cuddy. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, next, colleagues, under communications and petitions, you'll see a series, or well, there's 2 items related to convening as the approval authority for the expropriation of lands, which we will be doing now. Just a quick overview. It is like a 4-step process. Essentially what we do is we move to convene as the approval authority. We make a recommendation as the approval authority, then we come back and we basically adjourn the approval authority, come back as council and receive the recommendation of the approval authority and make it a final decision as council. So there's a couple of steps in the process, but if there's any questions along the way, you can let me know. So first, for us to move to convene as the approval authority, I need a mover and a seconder for the motion that council essentially sit as the approval authority on the advice of the deputy city manager with respect to expropriations of lands related to a project known as the Wellington Gateway Project. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder to sit as the approval authority. Moved by Deputy Mayor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion? No? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, colleagues, this is step 2. This is where I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that's contained within the report, which essentially approves the expropriation of lands for the reasons that you see within the motion, and obviously subject to the approval issued by the clerk on behalf of the approval authority in prescribed form. You can see that motion. I need a mover and a seconder for that, and then I can see any questions. Councillor Pelosa, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Discussion on this part. Okay, seeing none, then we'll open that motion for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, now I need a motion to adjourn the meeting of the approval authority. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor McAllister. Any discussion? Seeing none, then we will open the motion for adjournment of the approval authority, and then we will read as council.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, now that we're sitting in council, we have a recommendation from the approval authority. You may remember it from just a few minutes ago. Would someone like to move a motion that supports that recommendation of the approval authority? Councillor Cuddy, seconded by Councillor McAllister. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, the only other item in communications and petitions is item 6.3, which is related to the comprehensive review of the London Plan terms of reference. We have a motion to refer that to the relevant item in the agenda. Councillor Pelosa moves, seconded by Councillor Ferreira. Any discussion? Okay, we'll open the vote for the referral of that to the relevant area in the agenda for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, we have motions for which notice was given. But on to reports, which is section 8. We have the first item in that area is the 7th report of the Planning and Environment Committee. I will turn it over to the chair, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be pulling number 6, 3.1, number 8, 3.3, and number 9, 3.4, and primarily due to some housekeeping amendments that we have to make to those motions. And I will also be pulling number 10. Councillor Ferrer has an amendment that he'd like to introduce. I'm not aware of any other items that councillors wish to pull at this time.
Okay, so you're willing to make a motion? Well, just first off, we'll check to see if colleagues want anything else dealt with separately other than what's been identified by Councillor Lehman. Okay, seeing none, you can craft a motion.
Okay, so I'd like to put, see, 8.1 through to 8.5, 8.7, and 8.11 on the floor.
Okay, so 8.1 through 5, 7, and 11 altogether, moved by the chair. Any discussion on those items? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting as soon as it's ready.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Lehman?
Thank you. Prior to putting number 6 on the floor, I just asked the chair to indulge me a minute or two to consult with the clerk.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to put an amendment on the floor for 3.1. This is the modifications to public site plan holding provisions as a result of Bill 23. The previously considered bylaw contained administrative errors, and essentially there were some typos that were included in the bylaw. So we would like to correct that with this amendment.
Okay. Okay, so the chair will put the amendment on the floor. That's fine. Need a seconder. Councillor Hopkins. Moved and seconded. Any questions on the amendment? Okay, then we'll open the amendment for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
So,
Well, I will move number 6 as amended.
thank you. Since it's amended, I need a seconder for that. Councillor Hopkins is willing to second. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. I'll move on to number 8. Again, there's a small change that needs to be made here. This is some housekeeping amendments to the London Plan. Previously considered bylaw referenced the London Plan and should have referenced the official plan for the City of London 2016. So I would like to put that amendment on the floor.
Okay, seconder for the amendment. Councillor Cuddy, any discussion on the amendment? Okay, we'll open the amendment for, oh, no, was that discussion, Councillor Hopkins, or just, oh, okay, sorry. Okay, we'll open that for voting then.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
And I'd like to put number 9, 3.4.
Chair, as amended, you can put the as amended motion on first.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I
So-
apologize. I'll move as amended.
Okay, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. Any discussion on the as amended motion? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. Now I would like to proceed to number 9, 3.4, and the same reasoning. We referenced the London Plan and should have been the official plan for the City of London 2016. So I would like to move that amendment.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Councillor Hillier, thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. So I'd like to move that motion as amended, number 9.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Rahman. Any discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. So I'd like to move on to number 10, and I understand Councillor Ferrer has an amendment to number 10.
Okay, but you're willing to put the original motion?
I will put the original motion on the floor.
Okay, the original motion's on the floor. Councillor Ferreira, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship and Chair. Through you, from our discussion that we had with the developer today, we did have some momentum with the municipal housing team, and we have agreed to meet back again, just so they can get more details on how it is that we could maybe find some space to put some affordable units in there. So I wanted to attach this amendment just to direct staff to continue those conversations. Thank you.
Can you just read your amendment out so the public knows exactly what it is?
I can. So item 10 as amended is that the civic administration, including but not limited to the staff of the municipal housing development team, be directed to work with the applicant to provide for affordable housing units in the above noted proposed development. It being noted that any such units could be part of the roadmap to 3,000 affordable units, as well as assist with council's strategic focus to increase access to a range of quality affordable housing options.
Seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor Trousseau. So the amendment is moved and seconded. I'll open any sort of debate or discussion on the amendment. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, thanks to Councillor Ferrer for circulating this in advance. That's always appreciated. Through you, Chair, my concern with this is around be directed to work with the applicant to provide for affordable housing units. We don't know whether or not the developer will agree to include any. I'm happy to hear that some discussion was had with them today. That's a positive step. But for me, what I'm struggling with is there's not a lot of specifics in here as to what the expectation from staff would be. And certainly, given that we approved this at planning as it was, the developer, in my opinion, wouldn't have any obligation to come back with any affordable units. The fact that they're willing to talk to us is great, but through you, I want to ask our staff what their interpretation of this direction would be in terms of continuing the discussion, and what this means in terms of the approval and timelines, in terms of it moving forward to a site plan, anything like that. Because one thing I'm not interested in doing is basically having this turn into a referral. So if we can get some clarification from staff on that, that's my first question.
Mr. Mathers.
Through your worship, our understanding of this as is proposed is that this would be just as it explicitly states working with them, so there's not an obligation, but just gives us the opportunity to have some further conversations to see if there is some funding that can align with what they're suggesting, but it wouldn't actually be referral back. It would just be us continuing to have that conversation, much as we do with other people that are interested in participating in the 3,000 unit program.
Okay, that's appreciated, because without like a number, a target number of units or where funding might come from, that was a concern I had. In a more general ongoing discussion, that's fine. I do want to be clear though, because what I didn't quite get is, through you, Mr. Chair, the timelines. Are we impacting timelines with this direction in any meaningful way? I mean, I understand that, you know, maybe it might be a day or two before a meeting could be arranged, but in a meaningful way, are we delaying any work going forward?
Go ahead.
Through your worship, no, we're not causing any delay, and there is no obligation, as you're aware, in terms of compelling, in terms of the affordable housing units. However, we'll continue to work with the proponent, and we can build in these clauses as part of our development agreement for the site plan, which ultimately gets registered on title.
Okay, so just to wrap up then, hearing that this can go through site plan and get registered on title, it doesn't have to come back to Planning and Environment Committee, it can move forward that way, I'm comfortable supporting this. I will say, and this is not directed to Councillor Ferreira specifically, I want to be really clear about that, because I actually appreciate that he's put in some work and met with the developer and moved this forward. But I would encourage all members of council, if you're having discussions with developers about projects in your ward, it's ideal that those happen before they come to planning committee, rather than working out, you know, between planning committee approval and a council meeting. I know that in this case, this was the timeline that Councillor Ferreira had, so I know it's coming to council because of that. But I think we always get notices of applications coming forward in our wards. I would encourage all members of council to engage with the builders, the developers. When you get that notice, reach out to the contact on that notice and have a discussion with them then, so that hopefully, because at planning committee, we actually could, through special area provisions, include some more specifics on this, than rather just in a discussion moving forward. So just some food for thought for people as they move forward with these applications in their wards.
Okay, I have Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor Trossau.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I do want to thank the ward councillor for doing his due diligence and working with the developer and with staff moving this amendment. That's all we're doing is amending the recommendation that was approved at planning. And I know at planning committee, we did have a conversation about the affordable housing and how we can get units. And maybe that's a question through you, Your Worship, that I'd like to ask staff. Since we do not have tools for affordable housing any longer, what are opportunities that we have, if any at all, and what can we expect in the future. I think everyone knows the importance of having these affordable units. I was fortunate to be on a planning committee the past couple of years where these large applications, 35-story, lots of units coming forward, always having those opportunities for affordable housing, and now we no longer see them. So just would like to little bit more information on what we can expect.
Mr. Mathers.
Through your worship, there's actually a few different opportunities you have right now. So there's been some changes to the provincial legislation that is opening up some opportunities for discounts related to development charges for affordable units. So we're hoping that that's something that the industry will take up. Opportunities like this one where we can work with people that are coming forward with buildings, that's another opportunity. And also on that advocacy piece of just letting the province and the federal government know how important affordable housing is, and that we need tools and mechanisms to make sure that housing happens.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the importance of the messaging that we're sending as a city, that affordable housing units are important in our community. Again, thank you to the ward councillor for doing his due diligence, and hoping this council will be supporting this amendment.
Councillor Trossau.
I also want to just second what was just said. I really appreciate the ward councillor taking this up, whether it was before or after the planning committee. The fact of the matter is, he took this up in a very diligent and responsible way. We need to send a stronger message that we take the inclusion of affordability very seriously. And if we don't have the tools, we have to find some, or we have to be more clever in terms of our negotiations. But I would not be comfortable just sitting back right now and having this go through without at least this additional opportunity to raise this point. So again, thank you very much, and I'll be supporting the amendment.
Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. Yeah, we're in a different time period than we were in the past term. This would have been an area where bonusing for sure would have come into play. The province has moved that tool out of our toolkit. Negotiations are there if you have leverage. The province has moved a lot of leverage. That being said, I think the councillor has done a good job, and there's a major development here downtown where we can start to learn and craft ways of speaking to developers and finding other ways that have been mentioned. And when we can work with a developer, we all recognize affordable housing is crucial during these times. I think this is a learning process, both for developers and for staff. So time to start learning and having those conversations, and we'll have to learn from their perspective as well, what they're seeking to make it financially viable to get these projects going. Because I concur with the Deputy Mayor, I don't want to see any delay in getting things built. We need housing stock. This is downtown. This is an important location, important for concerns that I raised at planning. Doubletree Hotel owner owns this property, is developing it. I don't want to see that hotel being impacted, as it's such a crucial piece economically for RBC Place. So thank you, Councillor, and I will follow this with staff to see, I want to hear more about how the conversations go and how they can be applied, to future development. I will support the amendment.
Okay, any other speakers to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, so the amendment is moved and seconded. We've had some debate. I'm going to open it for voting now.
Motion carries 15-0.
Okay, and now we have a motion that has been amended. I don't know if you want to put that on the floor,
So I'll put the
Chair.
amended motion on the floor.
Okay, and I need a seconder since it's been amended. Councillor Ferrer, would you like to second? Okay, all right, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the now amended motion? Seeing none, we'll open that motion as amended for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes the 7th report of the Planning Environment Committee.
All right, thank you very much. 8.2 is the 7th report of Corporate Services Committee. I will turn it over to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to put the committee report on the floor. However, I do believe, give me just a moment. Just want to find the number, make sure I've got the right one. I do believe Councillor Trussow had an item that he wanted to vote against. That might be the next report. Never mind. I'm going to put the whole report on the floor unless somebody wants to pull something.
Okay, does anybody want anything dealt with separately in the 7th report of Corporate Services Committee? Okay, then you can make a motion for the whole report. Okay, so that's moved. Any discussion on the items in the Corporate Services Committee? I'm going to make one comment just from the chair. Within this, you'll see, and it probably comes as no surprise that I comment on this, having served as a member of the board of directors for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for, I think, over 4 years now. I sit now on the big city mayors of that organization, and so I won't be running for re-election. I think it's incredibly important that we maintain a presence on the board, and I want to thank Councillor Frank for putting her name forward. I will tell you, though, it's a lot easier to win the vote if colleagues take the time to show up in Toronto in May and support the councillor in her bid. Even if you can't come for the whole conference, perhaps you could make it down for the voting. Certainly I will be there to help her campaign and advocate for the continued seat belonging to London. Certainly reach out to those I know across the province as well and encourage them to support the councillor. So I'd encourage you to do the same if you have connections. I'm kind of looking at Councillor Hopkins here. And hopefully, you know, with your support of council, good luck in May, Councillor Frank. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Sorry, Your Worship. I do just want to check with Councillor Trussow. I was looking at the right number. Item 9 on the corporate services is the members of council COVID policy. And Councillor Trussow was opposed that committee, but he's indicated he doesn't need it pulled to vote against here.
So we can still deal with the whole report. Okay, that's good.
And I will share that I do have my hotel and train booked for Toronto, so Councillor Frank can count on my support.
Excellent. Okay, any other discussion on the corporate services report, all of the items? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
And that concludes the 7th report of the Corporate Services Committee.
Okay, 8.3 is the 7th report of the Community and Protective Services Committee. I will turn that over to Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. I'll put the, a motion was circulated in advance regarding the temporary winter response. So I believe that the mover and seconder would like that pulled then. Okay, so I'm pulling number 5. That leaves 1 through 4. Everything was a unanimous vote at committee. Looking to see if anything else would like to be pulled.
Does anybody want anything else pulled from items 1 through 4? No? Okay, Councillor.
Thank you. Items 1 through 4 are on the floor. All was unanimous, and the majority of our conversation was focused around item 5, which we'll deal with next.
Any discussion on items 1 through 4? Okay, that's moved by the chair, and we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. Item 5, the Winter Response and Community Accountability Working Group funding reallocation request was discussed at length at the committee. It passed unanimous. The conversation focused around the funding third-party, well, we're the funders, but the third-party working group that organized the conversation, that they set the priority amongst themselves, looking at the community in a response of what's needed, and they bring their proposal to the city of looking to reallocate some funding to make sure, as they see what's needed in the community, they could respond quickly and appropriately. I would direct any questions through staff, as it is obviously an evolving situation to care for those in our community who are struggling, and some who just need extra help with spaces to feel like they're part of the community, shelter beds, and food security.
Okay, so Councillor, you'll put the recommendations that came from committee on the floor. Okay, so that recommendation is on the floor. I'll look to speakers. I know an amendment was circulated, so I could go to the mover or the suggester of the amendment now, if you'd like. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Morgan and the chair. We did fully support the motion to reallocate the unspent funds for the winter response. So the Community Accountability Working Group had come back with asking us to reallocate the money to ArcAid, Salvation Army Center of Hope, and CMHA Coffee House, which I have no issues with at all. The amendment here is around amending number D only. And it takes the currently there's a $325,000 second payment that's going from June to November that will provide 6 months. They're ramping up to hopefully 20 overnight beds for women only. I've confirmed 3 times now it will not be 24/7. So what I'm recommending is that instead of doing that $325,000 where the 24 hours will not be achievable, and right now we don't have any beds and we're going up to 20, we could take that $325,000, give $262,000 to Center of Hope for 6 months. This would give 16 shelter beds, 8 for men, 8 for women. It would be a 24-hour shelter, which means don't have to go out in the heat or the rain. 3 meals per day plus snacks. On-site 24/7 security would be provided for the operation that houses 230 plus residents, staff, and the King's College students who are providing the free counseling program to residents. The alignment of the contracts to support the approved expansion of the shower program through Salvation Army Center of Hope, and also the CMHA.
Councillor, just 1 sec. I think it would be helpful if you could read the actual text of the motion. I can get the seconder to just confirm that they're good with the motion, then you can continue with your support for the motion. But I'd like to actually get the motion on the floor, and since it was circulated, the public hasn't seen it. So
That's
if you
why
could,
I was reading it out.
Yeah, so I don't need the whole, I don't need the whole preamble read out. That's yours to make your case for. What I need you to read out, just so the public is aware of the actual amendment clause that we would be considering that would be up on the screen for voting, and that's the part near the end of your letter where you want to add a new part D. If you could read that piece out so people know exactly what it is. I'll confirm with the seconder that they're good. We'll get it on the floor, and then you can make the case.
Okay, sounds good. So I have worked with the clerk's office, and the amendment that I've got bringing forward says that clause 2.4 of the 7th report of the Community and Protective Services Committee be amended as follows. A, by adding the following new part D. D, that $325,000 of the original allocation to London Care's Safe Space be reallocated for 1, a one-time contract amendment as per the above noted procurement policy section 20.3E with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Thames Valley Addictions and Mental Health Services in the upset amount of $63,000. And 2, a one-time contract amendment as per the above noted procurement policy, section 20.3E, with the Salvation Army Center of Hope in the upset amount of $262,000. And B, the existing part D and remaining parts of the clause be renumbered.
Okay, and Councillor Prival, you wrote a letter, you're ruling to second, okay? So that's moved and seconded. Councillor Stevenson, now you can go ahead with your making the case. And I'll start a speakers list on this as well.
Okay, so I won't reread what I already read, but basically, council has before them an opportunity to reallocate the $325,000 to 2 organizations who can provide more service more immediately and for better value for the money. So the question that I get is, why am I doing this? And the reason is super clear. There are no beds, and it will not be 24/7. What came before council, if we remember, there was the hunger strike and this winter response came from that, $5 million to be an emergency winter response, temporary funding to save lives. And council approved $650,000 for up to 20 beds with 15 emergency shelter beds for winter alerts. And it was to be 24/7. And I think everyone has agreed all along that what is needed are beds and 24/7 shelter access. So the only reason to do this is because the services that we were told would be provided will not be provided. And we have agencies who are ready and willing to offer those services and more right now. And the Community and Accountability Working Group has already recommended these two groups. So that's the reason why I've chosen the Center of Hope and CMHA Coffee House, is because it is what the Community Accountability Working Group recommended with the unspent funds. So what came up in the CAPS committee was that we were defunding them. And I found that very disconcerting on a few different levels. One is it was only temporary funding. So we are defunding this program as of November 30th. That was always the plan. So there shouldn't be huge shock around that. And if literally the agency's viability depends on this shelter temporary funding, I think it raises some even more serious concerns. Because that is not what this money is for. It's temporary funding for shelter services for the homeless. Is this emergency response about the organization, or is it about the homeless? Because I repeatedly am under attack about that I am attacking safe space. And the only reason I even use that word is because there is no other name for the shelter project. Who is benefiting from this money? I mean, if it's about servicing the homeless, which is what this temporary winter response is, then I'm asking my fellow councillors to, let's keep that in mind, that that's what this is about. So in a nutshell, I really don't want to hear all the great things about Safe Space, because this isn't about them. They are funded through the multi-year grants process. They are a separate entity doing good work. This isn't about them. This is about emergency winter response. And I don't want to hear negative things about Salvation Army, because that's what came up in CAPS as well. They were recommended by the Community Accountability Working Group. They were suggested for the unspent money. That is why it's brought up.
You got about 30 seconds left, Councillor.
Okay, well, the mayor had said delays are not measured in days, they're measured in deaths. These are delays. We've got the group that Londoners hold us responsible, and rightfully so. We say that we are open and transparent, so here it is. We have $325,000 left. You are on the public record as to how you want to spend it. More money isn't going to be the answer to this serious issue if it doesn't actually go to the people who need it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I've got a speakers list. I have Councillor Rahman, Councillor Ferreira, and then Councillor Pelosa so far. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm just wondering if it's possible, I have a question of a legal nature. I'm just wondering if I could be able to ask that question to Mr. Card. Thank you.
So you would like to go into camera for a question?
Thank you. I would like to go in camera to ask a question to Mr. Card.
Okay, I appreciate some advance notice on this so that a reason has been provided by the clerks. We're going to have the clerks read out the reason because it's not on the regular agenda. So the reason for going into camera, and then I will look for a seconder for the motion. Actually, you know what? There is a seconder for the motion, but I want the reason to be out there so people know the reason first.
So the motion will read that council convene in closed session to consider a matter pertaining to advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with respect to the informed winter response.
Okay, so that's a motion to go into camera, moved by Councillor Rahman, seconded by Councillor Ferreira. Any discussion? No? Deputy Mayor Lewis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if Mr. Card and his team are aware of the nature of the question, given that we've got some language, and if it's been their advice that it actually does need to go in camera. Our city solicitor occasionally has responded that he can provide a response in public. So before we start moving everybody out and moving into a closed session, is that his recommendation.
Yes, so I was politely given a heads up about this and confirmed with Mr. Card, but I'll let him speak for himself that the nature of the inquiry should be done in camera. Mr. Card, could you make some comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I confirm that I do believe this is the matter that should be dealt with in camera.
Okay, so Councillor Pelosa?
Thank you. As we are looking at moving in camera, wondering if any other councillors would have questions for in camera that would be covered by this motion, or if anything would need to be slightly amended that were covered at all, just before we go in and out, for we're not going in and out repeatedly.
Well, we're going in for legal advice, so as long as you're looking for legal advice, there would be the ability to ask questions. If you want to go in for a reason that isn't legal advice, I would not be allowing any questions unrelated to asking our solicitor for legal advice related to the matter before us. Okay? Okay. Anybody else with any questions before I call the vote on going in camera? Great. Okay, so we'll open the vote for moving into camera.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
My apologies to the audience. We don't usually go in camera twice, but sometimes matters arise where we need to do that. And so if you could please take your items with you. As soon as we're done, we'll open the doors. You can come back in for the public debate on this item. Okay, we're back in public session. Just to clean this up, I'm going to have Deputy Mayor Lewis just report out on the in-camera session.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to report out that we did go in camera for legal advice. Legal advice was received, progress was made on the matter for which we were in camera.
Okay, so we'll return to the speakers list, and for those who can't recall, Councillor Rahman asked to go in council for legal advice, but she's still on the list, so now that we've done that, I'll go back to her for her remaining time, which is pretty much all the time, because it was just a quick question to go into camera. So go ahead with your debate. And just to remind everybody, because I had a speakers list going in, I have Councillor Ferreira, Councillor Pelosa, Councillor Purble, and myself on the list still. So if you want to be added to that, let me know.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I have some questions and some comments. I'll start first with my comments. And my comments, I guess I'll start with just a quick conversation had today around where things are with Safe Spaces. So my understanding, and I think worthy of congratulations, is that Safe Spaces has 15 beds opening on April 29th. Being that the organization within the last month and a half has taken hold of this property and now been able to, within a month and a half, put in that 15 beds, so meeting the conditions of the up to 20 beds. I think that that therefore satisfies the request. Yes, we would have liked to have seen this happen quicker. Yes, ultimately, you know, we understand that there are things that stand in the way of organizations getting up to and getting started as they wanted to when they were allocated the funds. But my understanding is between March 14th and April 14th that there have been 862 service engagements, over 200 showers, over 100 loads of laundry. I just don't see how the organization could do more than what they are doing. It seems like they are doing the best they can and continue to improve the services that they are providing. My understanding is that part of the agreement was for the agency to be 24/7. Just wanted to check in with staff. My understanding is right now they're at 18 hours and is with the addition of the beds on April 29th. Will that move them to 24 hours, therefore fulfilling all the conditions? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Yes, Safe Space is currently offering services at 18 hours per day with the provision of the overnight beds by April 29th. Those hours may increase, but they also may just adjust. So as they ramp up their staffing model and they work within their budget. As Safe Space operates, they submit their monthly actuals to London Cares and are reimbursed based on the actual expenses incurred. So at this point, they're staying within budget and they're ramping up their service delivery model. Whether that gets to a full 24/7, we will see, but right now it is 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
Go ahead, Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. Then to follow up, so just so that I'm clear and my understanding is clear, right now with the way that they're operating, they are paying the costs up front and then we are reimbursing them?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you. So again, the London Cares has entered into a legal financial agreement with Safe Space. And that is the terms of the agreement between London Cares and Safe Space, is that expenses are submitted and they are reconciled on a monthly basis. So they have received a payment for services rendered up until the end of March 31st, is my understanding, through London Cares.
Okay. Next, I have Councillor Ferreira. And I'll just, because I know we had an in-camera session where everybody could sit down, but Councillor Pelosa is presenting the report. Councillor Stevenson is moving a motion, so I'll just remind you. Go ahead, Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I did have some questions before. Councilor Rahman actually asked some of my questions as well. So if I could just not count this as my time to speak and just wait, and I'll just round up some questions, I'd appreciate that.
Sorry, Counselor, say that again.
Take me off the speaker's list and I'll put my hand up.
Okay, I'll put you on later. You haven't spoken yet.
Thank you.
Counselor Pelosa.
Thank you. Now that we're all standing and we're reshuffled, I want to thank the mover and seconder for this motion. I know that might sound odd, but this item has come up in these points of concern several times at committee, but never became to council for a vote. Once this becomes a decided matter of council, it will be a decided matter for a year or until this has been fulfilled. As I'm hearing concerns from several across the service providers, very worried about the city and our partnership. What's going on? Are we actually committed to this? Which is taking up a great deal of time and mental and emotional capacity. Thank you to staff for already clarifying that the beds will be opening on April 29th, 15 of them, and that they are currently providing 18 hours of service, giving them some time between guests to clean, make changes in any staff updating they need to do or training. The funding we're looking at reallocating is the $325,000 that was allocated for them to get. So to me, that is defunding when you're taking every dollar that they knew they had coming in this report and reallocating it. When London started, we had the London Health and Homelessness Summit. We welcomed 80 service providers and over 40 service providers and 200 individuals to the table to set out, implement a plan that's community-driven, that will hopefully long and fruitfully serve the community and those who need it most, outliving election cycles of whatever government's in power at whatever level, being really community-driven and result-driven. We keep speaking of safe space. The whole of Community System Response Plan has the Action Accountability Working Group. It was their recommendations that come to the Community Protective Services Committee this cycle. It was their frontline people who know the needs of the community in this moment, and those skills and capacity of the organizers at the table of who's best to take on the work and deliver it in a timely manner. And it is them who chose Safe Space, Center of Hope, CMHA. I'm not going to question it as we put our faith in these organizations and London Cares to deliver this plan that's being community-led. I am not trained in these fields. I don't serve on the front line. I take the community feedback when I get it from those who do, who have the expertise and training to say what is needed, when is needed, and the best way to implement the plan to get us the results we're seeking. We made a commitment to the organizations to be partners to them, and partners with those in need. I question at this time if we're truly committed to it, as I see those questions from the community coming, and that this is a reoccurring conversation we're having, taking up great time of their staff time, our staff time, and our time that could be done actually servicing those in need and those on the front line, making a plan that could be a model for other communities to follow as well, as we actually have the impact we're hoping to with the taxpayer money. I'm asking colleagues to support the original motion and defeat the one that's been moved on the floor, for it will be then a decided matter of council and we can move on to other business. Thank you. And thank you to all those partners who are part of those 40 organizations, the 200 individuals, and those outside of it as well who are supporting our fellow neighbors in need.
Thank you. I have Councillor Pribble next.
Thank you. Do you know what? This is a issue, and we all know that we are in crisis. No doubt we are in crisis, and we know that, we see that. I myself spend times with people by the river and downtown on a regular basis, and the feeling is there as for the Londoners and taxpayers that we are not doing enough, and we are kind of on the right track. We are doing good things, but on the other hand, we are not spinning the wheels fast enough. We are losing people left and right or on a regular basis. And in January, how this came about. By the way, I don't consider this waste of time at all. I think it's actually great, and not just for us new councillors, even for the existing ones, even for the staff, because we are coming to a great initiative of the summit, and we need to learn from this how we can really work the fastest, the most efficient. As we already mentioned during our meeting, for us to make a decision middle of April when the funding ends and end of March is not the best creative planning and being proactive. How this came about, if we think going back, 650,000 allocated last year based on certain commitments from an agency. In January, during our meeting, we were advised that 20 beds the new facility has been attained and 20 beds are going to be in place. And we are now we are 2-3 months later, and there was no progress. And we all care, or we should certainly all care about the end results. And same as the Londoners, same as the people on the street, you know, when I hear doing the best they can, acting in their best interest, that doesn't save lives. That doesn't help people. The actions and results, they do. And I'm going to tell you one thing is, for me, the most important thing is, and I said that in terms of how we move forward, if there's no better solution, let's move the funding where we can actually truly help on people and help them as soon as possible. With this proposal, or what I'm hearing now, I'll tell you right now, if I'm hearing 24-hour service, April 29th, 15 beds. There is no way, even if I were to charge of the money and put it to someone else, no one can deliver that in that same time. For me, what I care about the people on the streets, in the encampments, and the more 24/7 and a roof over their head, so we save as many lives as possible. I'm very happy to hear that. I hope that, because again, the very unfortunate agreement we have as a third party and flow-through agency. So I hope London Cares will hold the agency accountable, and not because of the agency and whoever the agency is and whoever is running it, but no, in the perspective of the people who are on the street and they do need the help. So I'm really happy to hear that, and because I don't have, even as I said, even if I were in the charge of all that money, I wouldn't be able to, in 4 days, provide a better service than what's on the table now, and therefore I'm supporting it. I'm supporting, in that case, the original motion, because that's the best, currently the best we got on the table to save lives and help people on the street. Thank you.
So, Councillor, you said you were going to support the original motion. Are you withdrawing your second, or are you leaving that on the floor still?
Actually, do you know what? I'm gonna still second it, because I do want everyone to have an opportunity around this, how they feel about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I will leave that.
I just needed to clarify that, because there's two very different paths on that. I have myself next on the speakers list. I'm going to turn the chair over to Councillor Lehman, only because looking at the speakers list, I know Deputy Mayor Lewis is next and others. So, Councillor, and don't forget to time me.
Thank you. I have the mayor on the speakers list. You have 5 minutes starting now.
I don't think I'll take that long. I did want to make a few comments, though. First off, I think a number of my colleagues have made some of the comments I would have made. I think Councillor Pelosa addressed a number of the things that I would have said. So let me just say a couple of additional things. You know, it was brought up that a lot of this started with the hunger strike and the Forgotten 519. And there were demands associated with that hunger strike, and council came to a resolution. But at the base level, what was discussed there was a city-led response versus a community-led response. And we decided to support moving our winter response into a community-led response. And I think a commitment to each other, whether it was the city's involvement or the individual agencies, that we are dealing with a rapidly changing situation, a situation where we see you know, lives at risk and even being lost far too often. and that we're trying to do our best as a community to find that pathway forward and bring as many people together as possible. Now, community-led response means there is some giving up of control here at City Hall, where we are going to rely on partners and partnerships to deliver service. We're going to require on years and years of expertise in a variety of different agencies to bring forward solutions from those who have been working with those who are trying to help for not just days or weeks, but years in some cases. And so in this, and I would say too, that this is the model that our whole of community response is governed around as well. So the winter response, the whole of community response, a model of partnership. We often say that the whole of community response is building a bridge as we walk across it. So guess what? Things aren't going to be perfect every day of the week. We're going to make adjustments. Things aren't going to land exactly as we contemplate. And sometimes, we might have criticisms, but at the end of the day, everybody is ultimately trying to do their best to serve the community. And in some cases, how to serve that community will shift over time. It might even shift between when we fund or contract an agency and when, the actual delivery of the service happens on the ground. And so what do you have to do in this situation? I think you have to have a lot of trust. You have to have a lot of trust in the individuals who have served on the front lines for many years, trust in their assessment of an evolving situation, and trust in the leadership they can bring in partnership with the oversight that the city has through the contracts and provisions that it makes to provide these services to those who need it. And I think in this case, I always think about intentions versus impacts, because you can have very good intentions and they can create very negative impacts from time to time. And my worry about the motion as it was constructed is a potential negative impact is an eroding of that trust between agencies as it almost pits funding from one agency to another who can deliver the service the best. And I think, as we build the health and homelessness work out, we need as many people together as possible, and we have to try to avoid situations as best we possibly can that might have the unfortunate impacts of driving us apart or driving wedges between us. So I appreciate the new information that came out with Councillor Rahman's response. I think that's hopefully helpful to the debate. I appreciate the legal advice we received in camera. I'm certainly not supportive of the amendment on the floor before us. And I want to say to all of the community partners who are working on this, you may see these debates come up from time to time at council. You may see members of council ask questions, challenge ideas and norms. At the end of the day, I want you to know that you certainly have my full support for the incredible work that you're doing in our community, your commitment to the health and homelessness work. We don't expect you to be perfect every day of the week, but we appreciate your experience, your knowledge, and your on-the-ground necessity to be nimble in the way that you do your work each and every day to serve Londoners who are the most marginalized in our community, whether you use the word marginalized, vulnerable, or the many other terms that said. This is really, really hard work. It requires trust, it requires patience, and sometimes it doesn't go exactly as you might perceive it to go, but I certainly will say as mayor, I am very thankful for the dedication of the many individuals who've come together in collaboration to try to find a better path forward for our city. So thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for leading by example because you sat down with 20 seconds to spare. Well done. So I will turn the chair back to you.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll try and sit down with 30 seconds left. So I won't repeat everything that you said. I certainly appreciate the update that we received from staff, thanks to Councillor Rahman's question. But I am going to say this. I do believe that this is an important discussion to be having because at the end of the day, we are spending public dollars and we are spending them on a critical issue that from a public perspective, they have not seen a lot of visible progress on. And part of the reason they haven't is because we can't keep just doing things the same way we've always done, which is the whole point of the whole community response system that Ms. Livingston and the Summit has pulled together with all of our community agencies and partners. And I agree with the mayor's comments. It is tough work, and we don't expect people to be perfect every day. None of us around this horseshoe or in this chamber are perfect every day. No human being is. But I will say what has really disappointed me in just today is this amendment was circulated a few hours before the council meeting. So it wasn't on the public agenda. Obviously, someone has shared it out since then, because we've gotten a number of emails and text messages, which I hope whoever circulated it does not condone the message of. Because frankly, to receive messages calling a councillor racist or hateful for standing up and asking questions about a contract is the same kind of toxic attitude that they're accusing the councillor of having. It is her job as a duly elected councillor to ask questions about how we are spending public dollars, whether that's a flow through to an outside agency or whether it's in-house. So we are going to continue to have these difficult debates, as the mayor said. It's our responsibility to have them. It's our job to have them. And we want to hear from the community on this as well. However, that communication needs to be respectful. And that goes for everybody, whether they're an advocate for an agency, whether they're a frontline worker, whether they're somebody with a family member who's experiencing homelessness. These are tough situations, but it is not a license to send abusive, toxic messages to members of council via email or text message, asking us to silence a member of council, which was one of the messages I got today. Don't let her talk. That's completely inappropriate. And when I get those messages, I just want to go on the public record and say this right now. They get deleted. They don't get responded to. Because they don't deserve a response. We have a fiduciary responsibility to ask some tough questions about how money is being spent. Heck, we just had a tough discussion last week at SPPC about budget setting targets, because that's part of our job. This conversation is part of our job too. I do, however, believe in trying things differently, in giving new organizations an opportunity to succeed. I am really glad to hear that beds are going in, because it's critical that that gets delivered. So I'm not going to support the motion, but I appreciate the spirit in which it was brought forward to consider allocating funds to get some immediate results. Instead, we're allocating some funds for perhaps some longer term changes to how we do things. And I'm willing to give that a chance. But I do want to continue to see accountability in terms of how we are using these funds, because at the end of the day, we need to get some results. We need to get some people housed. We need to get some people supported. We need to get people off the streets. And we can't do that if we just continue to put money into trying to solve the problem without some accountability on how that funding is spent. So I just want to really, really strongly say it is our job to ask these questions. It's not an attack against an agency, and it's not that we don't care. And that's the reason I'm going to support the original motion, because I think it's worth giving this a shot. But we're going to continue to have some difficult discussions, and I just want people to keep it respectful.
Councillor Hopkins is next.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So on the amendment then that's in front of us, I won't be supporting the amendment, but I do want to thank the mover and the seconder for creating a conversation here with council. I do not sit on the committee. It is, I'm not an expert as well. I really do rely on staff giving me the information. I appreciate Councillor Rahman's questions, because I've learned a number of things here at council today. So for that, I am very deeply appreciated. I think I will ask my question through you, Your Worship, right now on the amendment, because it does relate to some comments that have been made here about this being a decided matter. So through you to staff, I won't be supporting the amendment. I will be supporting staff's recommendation. Do we need to make any changes to that recommendation to be a decided matter? Just want some clarity while we speak to the amendment.
Okay, I'll go to the clerk for some comment on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the amendment as it is, if there's a future amendment that comes forward that speaks to the same item, if it's voted on today and it is defeated, then it would be a decided matter of council.
So there's no other wording that needs to be added to the original recommendation, and a decided matter of council cannot be introduced within a 12-month period. I just want to make sure that we all understand the process.
Yeah, let me just add some context. It's slightly different than committee. A motion can be raised at committee. It can be defeated. It never actually makes it to council. When a motion is at council, there is a decision on that motion. It is a decided matter of council on the subject of that particular motion, yes. So they're slightly different from committee. You know, sometimes it's strategic to do committee work at committee, and at council there are consequences to some motions, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. And again, I will not be supporting the amendment.
Okay, thank you. I have a speaker's list, but I see two other people want to be on it. I'll go to Councillor Lehman, and then I think Councillor Frank, you had your hand up, and Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. We've got a huge problem on our hands that's been identified by other speakers today. My concern with government is that when presented with a challenge, that they answer the challenge with money. They say, well, we've got an issue with homelessness, so, well, we addressed it. We put $60 million towards that, and we did our job. Well, if that's the case, then we're not doing our job. And I'm encouraged to hear around the horseshoe tonight that people recognize our job is to address those that are suffering on our streets. We're going to be going into a time of providing really unique solutions to a problem that's being faced by many communities across North America. And I'm really impressed by the fact that our staff have looked outside the box and have come up with unique solutions that I think is gaining support. I think the fact that the province announced the monies today is indicative of that support. However, during this, road that we're embarking on, tens of millions of dollars are going to be spent, and it's incumbent upon us to ensure that that money is used wisely and actually achieves the results that we need to see. So in that spirit, I met with Mr. Dickens last week, and we had a fulsome discussion on the checks and balances. Are we going to see true deliverables on the monies that we're spending to ensure that the problem is being addressed that we all want to see done? So there's two aspects of it. One is choosing the partners that we're going to invest in and contract out to make sure that they're the right people to do the job. And from my discussions with Mr. Dickens is that agencies and associations are being properly vetted. We're determining, staff's determining, looking at their ability to deliver and their track record. Can they handle the task at hand? And this is what we do, which when we do with other contracts in the city. When we build a road, we have engineers that build a road, and we look at have they built roads before? Are they coming in at a cost-effective number? Can they do the job? What we also do with those contracts is we have deliverables. And what was very enlightening with my conversation with Mr. Dickens is that we don't just hand a huge sum of money over to agencies. And I would like to go through you, Mayor, to Mr. Dickens, to kind of explain to us the process of how monies are parceled out and comment on what's expected in return of those monies and kind of the process that we go down. Because we will be doing this more and more as we go down this road.
I'm just addressing a procedural matter, but I'm going to have, did you ask a question, Councillor? I hope our staff heard it because I got like 5 people speaking to me at once, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. So when we endeavor to do any of this work, I won't call it a luxury because I'm sitting beside my colleague, Michelle here, but we're not creating roads. And so when we look to provide this type of service, we look to service matter experts to help inform that process. And what we learned through the previous summer was that we at the city had a lot of learning to do in respect to what we felt were best practices and what we felt were effective programs. Thankfully, the community was very supportive in that process of walking us through what some best practices are for vulnerable populations and very specific vulnerable populations. Anytime that we enter into these types of agreements, funding contracts, service provider arrangements, we try to make sure it aligns with existing plans, whether it be the corporate strategic plan, whether it be the housing stability action plan, the roadmap to 3,000 units plan, whatever it may be. Following that, we make sure we follow our procurement policy. And with that, we have entered into an agreement with a lead organization such as London Cares that has a strong community reputation with all of the with the ability to address and satisfy the conditions within the funding agreements that we use under our procurement process. In those standard form agreements, we have certain obligations that service providers must fulfill. And it is our feeling, and it is through our management with London Cares, that they are fulfilling those obligations. Your point about not just handing over large sums of public funds with no strings attached, we do make sure that we provide funding in installments, that we work to reconcile those expenditures. In fact, April 28th is the reporting date for when we should receive our first financial reporting from London Cares. And that is an administrative process, and they will be doing their regular monitoring of any subcontractors. The funding agreement we do have in place with London Cares does provide the provision for independent contractors through that lead agency, of which they've put their own safeguards in place. So I hope that answers the councillor's question, but happy to clarify if not.
And Mr. Dickens, through you, Chair, if you see that expected deliverables are not being met, what actions would you take at that time?
Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So our Housing Stability Services team, Mr. Cooper and his folks, they're in regular contact with London Cares, with LOSA, and with any other funded partner that delivers this type of work. We receive a number of data inputs. Sometimes that data input comes through our HIFIS database, which tells us where people have been and which services they're accessing and who's at capacity and who's not. Those things are monitored on a very regular basis, sometimes depending on the situation on a daily basis. With our regular check-ins as it relates to this emergency winter response, if there are items that are way out of scope of the project or out of the process, then we would be sitting down with those service providers, with the lead agency. It is not uncommon that Mr. Cooper is on the phone with the executive director of London Cares on probably a daily or multiple times per week basis. It's a strong working relationship. It is one that we've had to cultivate and improve over the years, but it is one where it is built on a lot of transparency. So if we find that we have beds that are going underutilized or there's a spike in critical incidents, those raise red flags and alarm bells for us to sit down with service providers and ensure we're taking the proper steps to deliver on the service, but also ensure the safety and well-being of the staff and the participants. So it is through a regular dialogue. We would step in immediately with those service providers and continue through our good working relationships to course correct if need be. I would say, though, that these service providers have gone above and beyond numerous times to ensure that they're delivering the best possible service that they can. And we have not had any significant concerns at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's checks and balances, but that doesn't absolve us as counselors for asking these tough questions that are being asked today. And that has been mentioned a few times. So I thank the counselor for asking the tough questions. And I expect as we, again, go down this path, I encourage everyone to ask similar questions of agencies, of staff, when you're out and about engaging with the public, and making sure that what we're doing is getting the effects that we need to see. Because as Councillor Pribble said, at the end of the day, we have to stop people from dying and suffering on our streets. So thank you.
Colleagues, I'm just going to, we're probably going to regret electing a mayor who's read the procedure bylaw, because we haven't always done this right in the past, and I believe in doing things right. So I had a request from the mover and the seconder to withdraw the motion. I want to read you section 11.6 of the procedure bylaw, which is called withdraw before put requirement. Every motion shall be deemed in the possession of council for debate after it is accepted by the chair, but may, with the permission of council, be withdrawn at the joint request of the mover and seconder at any time before the motion is disposed of. And it is the part that we have not always followed is with the permission of council, which means if there's not, if someone objects to withdrawing, in other words, my ruling will be, should this request come forward, is the mover and the seconder want to withdraw it, and a councillor objects, then I'm going to have a vote on whether or not the motion can be withdrawn, because I deem the with permission of council to be a majority of vote of council. So, Councillor Pelosi, do you have a question about that?
They have requested it be withdrawn, or should they? Then I object.
Yes, I just was asked the question, can I withdraw the motion? I'm providing some procedural guidance because as the chair, I will make the call that this is how I'm going to proceed. If someone doesn't like the call, under the procedure bylaw, you can challenge the chair and the majority of council can overrule me. But I intend to follow the procedure bylaw on this. I would say to committee chairs, this is actually in the committee section as well. For those reviewing the procedure bylaw, you might want to consider whether this is something we're going to do, but given that there are consequences to moving a motion to council and being able to withdraw it in things being permanent, I think it is important in this case to follow the procedure bylaw very clearly in the way that I interpret it, to make sure that it is a decision that is in compliance with the way that we follow our rules. Councillor Trossel.
I'll keep this not on the merits because I haven't spoken to that yet, but this is going to be a procedural question. Should the motion amendment be retracted, and should council allow that to be retracted? And should there be members of council who feel like we spent a lot of time debating this and we would still like to see a decided matter of council? Would it be in order for a member of council who is opposed to the amendment to put it back on the table if there's a second for purposes of getting that decided matter of council?
The clerk's answer to that is yes, and I accept that advice and would say yes. If someone withdrew, someone else can take over the motion if they like. That being said, the motion is in my opinion, the possession of council, and so it will require a majority of us to agree to allow it to be withdrawn at council. So I guess I do have a speaker's list, but at this point, I just want to check with the mover and seconder, given what I've said. Is it your intent to ask if you can withdraw the motion? Yes. Okay, so then I would ask if any member of council objects to the motion being withdrawn. Okay, then we're going to craft a motion to authorize the request to be withdrawn. It will require a majority vote of council, in my opinion. And I just want to check with the clerks to make sure I get the language proper on this. This requires, it says in the procedure bylaw, it says with the permission of council, and I deem that to be a majority of council. not 2/3, a majority. So the motion will read, and this will be requested by the mover and seconder, so that pursuant to section 11.6 of the council procedure bylaw, the withdrawal of the motion to amend item 5, clause 2.4, as proposed by the mover and seconder, be approved. So if you vote for this, you're authorizing the withdrawal of the motion. The debate will be over. There'll be no more motion. If you deny this, we will continue debate on the motion in the possession of council, and someone else can take over the mover if necessary. Is this a question?
Is it debatable? Is it debatable?
I'll seek formal advice on that before I make a ruling. Withdrawal of a motion is not debatable under the procedure bylaw. So this is simply a vote that we will take. Okay? Okay, so the motion on the floor will be that pursuant to section 11.6, as I described, that the withdrawal of the motion be approved. In other words, a vote yes is voting to allow the motion to be withdrawn. A vote no is saying you don't want it withdrawn, you want to continue debate on it. So there's no debate, so I'm going to open that for voting now.
Closing the vote, motion fails 7-8.
Okay, so we'll continue debate on this motion. Councillor Frank is next.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to share I won't be supporting this motion. I find it highly problematic for a couple of different reasons. I'm just going to highlight them because I think they've already been mentioned by a variety of different speakers. But I do think if we move forward with this, we'll be losing some community trust that we've been building over the last couple of months, and we've been working with the Homelessness and Health Summit. I think we're about to embark on a very big process that relies a lot on trust, and so I'm hoping to keep that trust existing between the city and the community. And I think that given that we've heard that Safe Space will be able to open with beds by Saturday, I think the funding will be going to good use and meeting the purpose of what it was originally designed for. And the community is the one who's kind of indicated what they want funding allocated for, and I think that they seem happy, and it seemed like it was a process that satisfied many of the agencies that are involved, and I don't want to go against what the community is recommending that we do. So I won't be supporting this motion, but thank you.
Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, and through the chair, echoing the comments that Councillor Frank just said as well. And I do think trust is a big part of this discussion. I think sometimes that's overlooked. I would also like to speak to the fact that I think that a service provider such as this also speaks to our strategic goal of serving women and girls. And I do think that an agency such as this has had a meaningful impact. And to Councillor Rahman's points in terms of the stats, I do think that we can go back to the community and show tangible results. I do think that they have served a vulnerable part of the population, which is underserved. And they have shown that there is a need for this in the community, that there are people who need these services. I do agree, I mean, the beds, yes, that was part of the discussion, but I don't view that as a strike against them. I think they've provided a very valuable service to a group that we have identified as high needs and one that we need to service. So I will not be supporting this. And I do think that we, as Councillor Frank indicated, we need to maintain that trust. We need to stay the course with the collaborative approach we've taken. And I think part of that is working with our partners. It's a very fluid situation. We're talking about human beings. And I don't think that we can just look at this as a static environment. We have to keep the conversation going, and we have to work with our community partners. Thank you.
Councillor Cuddy.
Thank you, and through your worship, I want to thank the mover and the seconder for bringing this forward. Councillor Stevenson looks at things with an accountant's lens, and I appreciate that as her colleague. You know, we're trusted. We are stewards of this city, as I mentioned last week, And we are responsible for every penny we spend and every dollar we allocate to different departments. And I appreciate the fact that Councillor Stevenson and Councillor Pribble took the time and trouble to look through this. And I'm sorry that we haven't been able to remove this, this motion off the floor at this stage. But I do want to, I want to go on record as saying that I'm very grateful to be able to serve with both of you. And I do want to mention that you know, I think Councillor Pelosa said that not many of us are experts at dealing with those at risk. And I know Councillor Pribble spends a lot of time on the streets dealing with people. And so if there's an expert in this room, it's Councillor Pribble. So I want to thank you both for the work you've done through your worship. And while I won't be supporting this motion because it actually should be withdrawn by now, thank you so much.
Point of personal privilege, Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. Since I was referenced, and those are the words I said, I do believe there are better experts in the room. Some of us ourselves have lived experience with homelessness, if that counts. Some of us also serve meals out of various organizations in town and do various street outreach. Councillor Pribble has certainly been there. I believe Councillor Stevenson has been there. Councillor Ferreira and many of us do lots of work. Some of us share on social media, some of us don't. And we all take serving the community very seriously. And I don't believe it's up to us to say who's the experts amongst us on certain things. So thank you to all my colleagues who take time to engage in various street level work in the community.
So it's a point of personal privilege. I'll just say this. Every member of council has been elected. Every member of council brings their expertise. And I generally agree, we're not going to, you know, we shouldn't get into suggesting who has expertise and who doesn't. I see nods. I think that addresses the point of personal privilege. We'll each continue to respect all of each other's talents. That exhausts my speakers list, except for Councillor Trousseau. Go ahead.
I was hoping not to have to say anything because the points of substance have been so well stated by other people. We received this motion at 11 o'clock this morning for a 1 o'clock council meeting. This has been a controversy that's been going on for some time. It's no secret. So I really want to push back a little bit from the notion that this was good that this was put on the floor today. No, this is not good that this was put on the floor today. Because I think that this did not have to wait until 11 o'clock, 2 hours before the meeting. So I just feel as if members of the community did not have the opportunity to see this on an edit, and I believe in good faith, this would have been put on an agenda. This would have been put on an agenda in time for it to be on the ad.
I have to deal with a point of privilege when the point of order is raised, so I'll go to Councillor Stevenson on a point of privilege.
Yeah, I don't.
I need the microphone.
I don't appreciate the good faith comment because unless Councillor Trousseau wants to ask me the efforts that I've done, and I can show him all the emails, I've been dealing with this for over a week, and this was the fastest I could get it done. It was done in the great deal of good faith.
So on the point of personal privilege, much like I mentioned before, regardless of whether or not it is posted on an agenda, councillors do have the right to raise motions at committee. People's opinions on whether that is a good idea or not, you can have, but it is the right of councillors, irrespective of people's opinion, irrespective of how they feel about the notice, to raise, debate and put motions on the floor at any time. So I'm
fair enough. Let me put it perhaps in a better, way.
I'd prefer not to put it in any way. I'd prefer to say a comment was made, the councillor wanted to express their right to move the motion. I've agreed with that. We can move on from that point. You can continue your comments because you still have time left, but we'll just keep it as the point of order has been dealt with.
And I'm glad that Councillor McAllister raised this. Because one of the points that really has been lost to this whole discussion is that this agency has been doing a lot of good for its clients. And it's been doing a lot of good in the community. And it's been doing a lot of good for a very, very specific clientele that is underserved, that we have recognized as being underserved. So I just want to take the rest of my time to just applaud and thank this agency for the work that they're doing. Because I do feel as if there are questions about the beds, yes. But I just feel that in the main, and in terms of what's going on the street and what's going on in the lives of people that are affected, this is an agency that's doing good work, and I do not want to lose sight of that. Thank you.
I had Councillor Pribble want to speak, but you've already spoken. You spoke right before I did, so you've... I think people need to read the section on personal privilege and understand it. So if you're calling a point of personal privilege, you can, but if it's not a point of personal privilege, I'm going to move on, so...
No, do you know what? I do want to mention this, and I just want to add one thing and that is, I'll tell you right now, I'm very proud of every single member of this team,
Okay,
what we are doing in terms of the community.
You can have that point of view. It's not a point of personal privilege to say what you're saying now. Share how much you like everybody after the meeting. It's not a point of personal privilege. You've already spoken. I'm going to keep this debate going and keep it tight. So thank you for your comments earlier, Councillor. Any other speakers who have not spoken to the motion already? It's pretty much just those online. Okay, I don't see any other speakers. So we have the motion moved and seconded. I know that it was attempted to be withdrawn. Permission was not given from council. So now we will vote, and this is on the amendment. So on the amendment that was proposed, we will open that for voting.
Okay. Closing the vote, motion is lost, 0-15.
Okay, so no, that was on the amendment. The main motion is on the floor. Councillor Pelosi put it on the floor. It wasn't amended, so we can stand without a seconder. Any other discussion on the main motion? Okay, let's open the main motion for voting.
Sorry, just the recommendation is put, as in, yeah, as put, or we're good?
The clerk will speak to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, this wording is just to keep the flow of the minutes going, and after this motion, it will be, the original committee recommendation will be restated. Thank you.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Pelosi, is that your report?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to ask colleagues for a 15-minute recess. It's been 2.5 hours. So I'll look for a 15-minute recess moved by Councillor Cuddy, seconded by Councillor Trosau. All those in favor by hand?
That motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Great. I see both of them. Perfect. Okay, council's back in session. Thank you for the break. The next item we have is item 8.4, the sixth report of the Civic Works Committee. I'll turn it over to Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. In front of you is the sixth report of Civic Works Committee that took place on April 12th. I'd like to move items 1, or I'll use the numbers on the original report, 2.1 all the way down to 2.9 with the exclusion of 2.8 for consideration by council.
Okay, so does anybody else want anything dealt with separately? It looks like you want to move everything except 2.8?
Everything but 2.8.
Okay, everything but 2.8. Anybody want anything else dealt with separately?
There's also item number 11, sorry, which is.
Oh, you
for
want
some
that
reason,
separate?
No, we're going to put that on. It's called 5.1. We're going to put that on as well.
So Deputy Mayor Lewis, you had your hand up. Do you want something separate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know staff provided a follow-up to item 10, the Western Road, Sarnia Road corridor intersection.
Yeah, that's going to be separate.
So that's going to be separate?
Yeah, we're doing that separate.
Perfect.
Okay, so Councillor Rahman wants to put everything except item 2.8, which is 10 on our agenda on the floor. Does anybody want anything else separate? Okay, you can go ahead with that motion.
Yep, thank you. I'll move that.
Okay, any discussion on all of the items with the exception of the Western Road and Sarnia Road item? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. I'd like to deal with item 2.8, which is the Western Road and Sarnia Road, Philip Aziz Avenue corridor and intersection improvements. So you'll see from the report attached that there was some back and forth with the committee on how to deal with this particular item. The main reason for the back and forth was around whether or not to approve the EA because of some pedestrian signal changes that were discussed during the committee meeting. Coming out of that meeting, we basically, in that conversation, realized that we should have probably dealt with the EA, and this was a conversation between Councillor Trasso and I and our staff. And the reason for wanting to deal with that EA is we don't want to hold up any of the work, the necessary work that is needed in that area. So what I'm going to ask for you today, which may sound unconventional, is that we defeat the recommendation for 2.8 so I can introduce an updated one that has been agreed by the mover and the seconder. And so that way we can move forward with the EA, but deal with the pedestrian scramble, the discussion around pedestrian signaling, which isn't in really like the full scope of the EA. We can deal with that as a separate matter, which will still come back to committee for discussion. It's just separating these things out, making it clearer that the EA can move forward. We can move forward with this important project. So I'm hoping that we will defeat this motion, 2.8, the recommendations that's there, and then I can put forward another motion.
Okay, so as the chair, you'll put the committee's recommendation on the floor, but you're encouraging colleagues to defeat it. Is there any discussion on that? Because the first step is defeating the committee's motion if you agree with what was said there. Okay, looks like there's no discussion. So that means the original committee motion is on the floor, which the chair is asking us to defeat. I will open that for voting.
Closing the vote, motion is lost, 0 to 15.
Okay, I'll go to the committee.
Thank you. I've shared some language with the clerk regarding the updated language that we're looking for 2.8. And it is very similar to the original language, which was around the environmental study going forward. So I'll just, if it's helpful, I'll read this in. So the following actions be taken with respect to the environmental study report for the Western Road and Sarnia Road, Philip Aziz Avenue corridor and intersection improvements. A, the environmental study report for the Western Road and Sarnia Road, Philip Aziz Avenue corridor and intersection improvements be revised to include more assessment of pedestrian priority traffic signal phasing intersection scramble in brackets at the Western Road, Sarnia Road, Philip Aziz Avenue intersection during the project design phase. B, Civic Administration be directed to report back to Council Committee on the assessment of future signal operations during the project design phase. C, the environmental study report for the Western Road and Sarnia Road, Philip Aziz Avenue corridor intersection improvement be accepted subject to the revision in Clause A. D, a notice of study completion for the project be filed with the municipal clerk. And E, the environmental study report be placed on the public record for a 30-day review period. So I'm moving that. Thank you.
I need a seconder for that since we defeated the committee recommendation. Councillor Trosow, I know that's in your area. So that's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? You'll be able to see it shortly on your screen. Okay, Councillor Trosow, go ahead.
Yeah,
You can stand up. It's council.
Yeah, I want to clarify one point, and that is by excising the language from the environmental assessment that created in the minds of the committee members the problem, we are able to move forward with the environmental assessment and not be bound by what we thought the negative language in there was, which means moving forward, we can consider a scramble, whereas under the environmental assessment as it was drafted, the scramble was taken off the table. So I just want to clarify that, especially for other councilors who are not at the committee and also for members of the public, because I know there's quite a bit of interest in this. But this, I think, was a very, very good, good way to sort of reserve the issues that we want to see just at the intersection and move forward with the very, very necessary environmental impact report. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, so what you have now is the new motion that Councillor Rahman just read out on the floor, moved and seconded. We'll open that for voting.
Councillors Pribble and Trosso. Thank you. Closing the vote. Motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. That completes the report.
Okay, the next report is 8.5, the 13th report of the SPPC. This is the one related to the strategic plan. I'm going to have Deputy Mayor Lewis present that.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'm prepared to put the 13th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee on the floor. This is the finalization of Council's 2023 to 2027 strategic plan. I will share with Your Worship, as you had to join us remotely and weren't able to participate in the whole meeting, that we were extremely efficient for an SPPC and finished in 18 minutes. Of course, that follows hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of staff and council work going into this. So I just want to take the opportunity to once again thank Ms. Livingston and her team, and particularly Ms. Wilcox and Mr. Steinberg for all the work that went into getting this final version before us.
Sure, and I'm going to add myself to the speakers list. I'm going to pass the chair over to Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. I recognize I have the chair, and my first speaker is Mayor Morgan.
Thank you, and I appreciate the quip from the Deputy Mayor about running a meeting in 18 minutes. I was busy meeting with the Premier, and we got $8 million today. But I do want to talk about the strategic plan and the work that Council's done. I certainly appreciate all of the dialogue we had, colleagues, and to come to a consensus where we can all hopefully today support the strategic plan as contemplated, I think, is a testament to all of the work that you did within the process, as well as all the engagements that you did with your constituents on this important document, which will guide our direction for the next couple of years. I know that we will have a debate about how to fund and pace the strategic plan. That debate is not today, though. That is for the multi-year budget. Today, I think we can take pride in the work that we've done to craft a document that hopefully we can all be supportive of. And with that, I do want to say a couple of words about our staff. Crafting a document of this magnitude, preparing us with all the information that we have, having the many hours of meetings that it took for us to find that path forward together, even some extra meetings that we reserved in the calendar, would not be successful without the work of our city manager, Ms. Wilcox, and of course every division in the city who fed information, documents, engagements into the strategic planning process, whether they were working on the back end of supporting our work, or whether they were out in the community running and supporting some of the engagement activities with Londoners across the city. I just wanted to take a moment to say, on behalf of all of council, thank you to the staff team for the support on one of our most important documents for this term of council. And again, thank you to my colleagues for the work that you did on the strategic plan, and I look forward to voting for it today.
Thank you. I'll return the chair, noting that Councillor Hopkins is on the list.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I too want to thank staff for the great work, but I would also like to thank you for allowing us to have the debate and the conversations here on the floor for the public to see. We just had a conversation today at council, the importance of having conversations that the public can view and listen to us. And I really want to thank you for, even though some of those evenings were quite long and I didn't even think I could make it to the 11th hour, I really do appreciate listening to my colleagues, learning, understanding, and having those conversations. So thank you.
Any other speakers to this item? Okay, with that, we will open the floor for voting, and this series of motions includes approval of our 2023 to 2027 strategic plan.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I will have you present the 14th report of SPPC, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am happy to present the 14th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. We did have some divided votes, but I've not been made aware by any members of council that they wish items pulled. So if you wish to poll council now for any items they wish pulled, that would be appropriate.
Councillor Van Meerbergen, which you wanted an item dealt with separately?
Yes, if we could vote on item 9, 5.2 separately, please.
Yes, we can certainly do that. Any other items councillors would like dealt with separately? I don't see any, so I'll let the Deputy Mayor craft a motion.
I am then happy to put the balance of the report, items 1 through 10, excluding 9 of the 14th meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee.
Okay, so that's everything on the floor with the exception of the request of the Governance Working Group meeting on the floor. So the Governance Working Group meeting, not part of the series of motions, everything else is. Any discussion on that? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on 2.1, the update of the whole of community system response implementation. Today is exactly 6 months from waking up as a newly elected councillor. And it's been an interesting 6 months. One of the biggest reasons I ran last summer was to have an impact on the homelessness situation and the downtown core. And as much as I appreciate this whole community system and what's happening, I have expressed the concern I have that the whole of community doesn't include the councillors. And we represent the community, and I've been, and my ward is particularly impacted. It is crazy there right now. And I need to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it. And I asked for the monthly updates, which we received, but we just found out they had a meeting and there's going to be another meeting. The group got a 25-page document for the leaders to review, and I consider myself a leader. And I want to be part of this. I don't want this brought to us at the end with just, here it is, it's all done. I think it's really, really important that we have buy-in from the community, that the councillors are on board when this comes forward. And so the monthly report, I was looking for, like, literally what direction are we going in? I was looking for details. So if I could get clarity as to why 6 months in, I'm still out of the picture.
I'll go to the city manager.
Your worship, the Health and Homelessness Summit has been a community effort. Organizations that serve our community from a community health and social service perspective, from an institutional health perspective, education, business, BIAs, building and development. That's who's been in the room. Council is the body that has asked us to do that work, and we returned to Council on February 28th with the work of the community and an indication of the next steps. That's what we're moving forward with. So the report that we provided last month reflected the work to date. They had one meeting. We began to develop together, collectively with the community, what the whole of community implementation approach would be. That's what the work was, and that's what that report describes. We are doing this in real time. Since the writing of that report, we did have a meeting last week to further refine, based on the feedback of the meeting at the end of March, what the implementation approach should look like. How do people want to work together as a community to make decisions? Council is defined very clearly in that as a body that we are accountable to, that those tables are accountable to. We have to return to you monthly to tell you where we're at in terms of progress. We have to return to council with a business case on when we're ready as a community effort on how to use the LCRN funds, and probably other requests as we move forward with implementation. So from my perspective, that is the engagement of council as we move forward. You are the decision makers, you are the body that is accountable. Council is not the only funder of this effort. There is the provincial government. We have a planning relationship with the Middlesex London Ontario Health Coordinating Council. Forgive me, some of these terms are new to me. And so it's a multi-factor relationship. So we are not excluding anyone from the conversation. The work is being done with the community in a community space where they are comfortable in participating, and that is being reported regularly out to council.
I just want to add just some context because I've certainly been doing work on behalf of council on the lobbying front. Much like the city manager will bring the regular monthly reports, it's my intention the next regular report to also update council on my activities and the lobbying that I've been doing on behalf of this body so that you're well aware of the engagements that I've been making. In fact, this week, from Wednesday to Friday, I'll be traveling to Ottawa to meet with a series of ministers on getting support for this initiative. And so I'll add to what the city manager said. It's my intention to report out to council in the next month on the work that I've been doing as well so that you can all see exactly what I've been doing and the progress we're making from that perspective on behalf of council as well. I'll go back to Councillor Stevenson now.
Thank you, and through the chair, Mayor Morgan. It's the #1 issue in the city. It's certainly the #1 issue in my ward. There's an immense amount of frustration and, quite frankly, despair in this moment. And I'm just asking, and I've been doing this behind the scenes for 6 months, and so I'm speaking out more now because I don't know where else to go. But the people need to know that I do desperately want the information, and I do want to be a part of it, and I feel as though we're being stopped. And so, do I have access to the documents that are being shared with, say, when I go to the BIA, I get lots of information. They're telling me what is happening behind the scenes. And I'm just wondering why we can't have those documents even at summary, or we're allowed to be on the calls.
To the city manager.
Your Worship, I've not excluded anyone from the meetings. I believe 2 councillors showed up at the end of March, and I believe a councillor tried to join the online meeting just last week. It is a community discussion, a set of community partners. Our intention in the next monthly report would be to share with council what was discussed, what the whole of community implementation framework looks like, what the next steps are, just as we did in the most recent report. If council wishes to direct me to include a member of council in those meetings, I would appreciate that direction.
Councillor Stevenson.
So the first 3 health and homelessness summits, I was specifically asked not to attend, but at the direction of the city manager. I did go to the, and I informed you ahead of time that I was going to go to the 4th one, and we did, and I don't believe we were disruptive, but we gave you advance notice. We went. I'm looking for clarity as to how I can be involved, and I'm asking to be involved. And I don't need direction to council. I want it to be clear that the city councillor is not being impeded, that I'm free to go, free to get the Zoom links, free to get the documents that are being given to my constituents and to my BIA manager.
Your Worship, it is true that I respectfully asked members of council to allow the community to do their work in the first 3 summits. I don't think it can be understated the level of concern, lack of trust, worry amongst community partners and the work they were trying to do together with us at the city. We had to create a space to build trust, to be able to have honest and frank conversations where members of the community, members of civic administration needed to acknowledge that perhaps things in the past had not been done the way we all wanted them to be done, and to try to create an environment where we could do something different. I always say if you want a different outcome, you got to be different. And that's what we were trying to do in that space. I respectfully ask council, as members of council, you carry different weight when you come into a community room. You are there, you may seem like you're an individual member of council, which is true, but you are also a member that makes decisions. You make decisions about funding, you make decisions about policy and bylaw. So it is a power differential when community is trying to do work together. That is why I asked council to respectfully give space for the community to do their work together. We are now moving into the next phase of implementation, and we have built a level of trust. It is fragile. It takes ongoing care and feeding and relationship building. And there is still power differentials between organizations, between civic administration, and members of council. You have a decision-making authority. You are a funder. You are a policymaker. You decide on bylaws. All those things have a very big impact on the work that this coalition of people are trying to do. It is well acknowledged the role of council and the accountability that the work of this community group has to bring forward. Hence the monthly, very happy to deliver monthly reports. So those are just to give some context about why. It is not from an exclusion perspective. It is about trying to create a safe and comfortable space for people to do what is, frankly, incredibly difficult work. Probably the hardest work I've ever had to do in a 35-year career.
Councillor Stevenson, you got about 40 seconds left.
All right. I appreciate the work that is being done, and I honored the requests in the beginning. It is become a little untenable for me and in terms of my constituents. I'm not 100% sure that I'm on board necessarily, and I want to be enrolled, to be a part of it. We've got, you know, an agency was put in against the community improvement plan, against the core area action plan. It was said it was only going to be 4 months. It's longer. The trust gets to go both ways too. We're talking about trust with them, but I can't get copies of agreements. I had to file an MFIPA just to be able to see even what services were contracted for. So I think that I'm asking too, that I be entrusted with more information and in terms of what is happening, because
Councillor,
it matters.
Your time's up on this subject. I have myself next on the speakers list, then Councillor Trossau and Councillor Pribble, but I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Rahman so I can speak.
Thank you. Recognizing I have the chair, Mayor Morgan is next on the speakers list.
I want to make some comments on this through the presiding officer to my colleagues. The city manager and I had discussions early on about politicians not being in the room and at the table. And having been on the last council and experienced whether you want to call it the hunger strike or the Forgotten 519, or a number, not all, but a number of agencies expressing a complete lack of distrust and criticism in the way that we may have been approaching some of this work. And to have the opportunity to have our starkest critics sit alongside people who may have thought we were doing a good job, to come together, to put their differences aside, where you have people who believe in rehabilitation and harm reduction sitting side by side at a table, talking about transforming a system. You know, that is a fragile coalition to have working together on changes that will probably transform the way they do their work. May change the way that they're funded, may change the way that they have to collaborate with the city and with each other. And we all have to recognize, and it took me a while in my first term to know that your words weigh an incredible amount. Your presence in a room changes the dynamic of the discussion that is happening. And there are times where it is very appropriate for councillors to be at a table, listening, engaging. And there are times where we have to create some space for others in a fragile coalition to have that space without us in the room, changing the dynamic of the discussion, to do some of that work too. Now, in my mind, that doesn't mean that council doesn't have a very important role. It doesn't mean that we can't access documents, have regular reporting, engage with community partners. But it does mean there will be some difficult gray areas where we might disagree on where we should involve them and maybe where we aren't. And I think we have to find a way to navigate that so that we maintain our understanding and support of the work that's being done. We allow the city manager and the leadership team at the Health and Homelessness Summits to keep this coalition of agencies together. I can tell you our strength in this, in engaging with other municipalities and talking with the work that they're doing, they cannot believe that we have the people at the table working with us on this that we have. There is a lot of infighting in other communities. There's a lot of disagreement. To be able to speak with one full community voice, I think is an incredible advantage to us. But it comes with a cost, and it comes with challenges, and it comes with us having to perhaps not be in every single discussion related to this. Now, I appreciate the councillor's desire, and I think all of us desire, and I've even desired at times to wanting to be in a room that maybe I wasn't in. But I do think we're at a point now where we've got the support of the community, where we are on a path and we are working together. And we do have a role to play, and we are receiving regular updates. That there is a way to navigate some of this desire for information, but there's also, we also have to respect that we want to ensure that we can continue to work together in this larger collaborative coalition of which the city is just one part. We're an important part, but the community is an important part. Those fundraising and giving up their individual dollars are an important part. The provincial government and federal governments are an important part. My colleagues across the province and Councillor Hopkins' colleagues across the province are an important part, and our colleagues across the country, because we won't solve this issue if we take only our own actions. We will solve it in collaboration as a community, as well as other communities, finding the best practices, sharing them, and moving forward together. So I certainly understand the desire And I know that, you know, an element of trust is very hard. And I know that pull to want to be involved in every conversation because we got elected because we wanted to be involved in everything, and especially on an issue as important as this. So I certainly commit to trying to help any member of council who wants to find, you know, how we navigate that gray area of our involvement and maybe creating some space better. And I'm happy to engage with you, with the city manager on how we can best do that if you're struggling. For now, I will say I have been supportive of the process as it's unfolded. I continue to be supportive of it, but I continue to have that discussion with colleagues about how we can find the pathways that make you comfortable and make you be able to respond to your constituent questions in ways that you're comfortable with as well.
Thank you. I'm returning the chair to Mayor Morgan with Councillor Trosser on the speakers list.
Sometimes the hardest part of exercising leadership is knowing when to just step back a little bit and let some other people who have more expertise than you take the front. And I think the point about just our presence in the room can be overwhelming and intimidating. And I acknowledge I have that problem myself in a lot of ways. At first I was like, really? We don't get to go to these meetings? And it's sort of like, I understand it now. Because I think that the process that unfolded was very good. We have a lot to do. I mean, nothing's going anywhere unless we approve the budget. You know? And we just approved a strategic plan that doesn't just speak about homelessness issues in generalities and vagaries. We put a lot of detail in that strategic plan. And that's our roadmap. That's our policy roadmap. We've spoken. And we expect staff and everybody else that's working with us to stay within that framework. I think at this point, I am very happy to just sort of continue along the lines as we are. And I'm the person, which is, I was elected, I'm the counselor, I should be in the middle of everything. So I'm really starting to appreciate, it's a subtle form of leadership, but I think that most of us here understand that. So I don't want to disturb that, because I think a lot of trust is being built.
Councillor Pribble.
Through your worship, to the staff, and I do want to mention that without exaggeration, some agencies, they did approach me and they did ask me why aren't we involved and why aren't we part of it. But to be honest with you, that's not. I'm more concerned now about three different things. The first date. When do you think that we should have the final plan? Second, when do you think the implementation of the first initiatives could be done? And I'm quite sure it's not going to be next week. What are we going to do from now till the initiatives are done? Because we do have crisis there, no doubt. It's getting worse, and we know that we should have anticipated it. I'm quite sure we all anticipated it once the beds closed from the winter program, that people have nowhere to go, so they'll end up being on the streets and in the encampments. The situation is really getting bad. We are getting, no doubt, I'll speak for on my behalf, the complaints, emails, phone calls I get have to do, number one, with homelessness. There are encampments starting nearby schools again. Parents are not happy. So if I can have approximate 3 dates for when could we have it completed, when first initiatives would kick in, and what we are doing from now till the first initiatives in, because we do need to do some things. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Your worship, the implementation tables will be stood up in May. The intention is to focus on 3 things initially. The first hubs that we want to put in place, the first highly supported housing units that need to be put in place, and also a clear strategy to address encampments. Those are the initial 3 priorities, and those meetings will begin in May. We're just, as I say, finalizing the approach to implementation, which is significant. You've heard me say, build a bridge while walking across it. That is what we are doing. So we are dealing still with a system that is struggling to meet the pressures and demands because our numbers have escalated dramatically over the last 18 months. Folks are doing their very best, and Kevin's team, Mr. Dickens' team, is daily working to respond to emerging issues. We are doing that in real time right now while we are trying to move forward to do the detailed planning and begin to stand up the hubs and highly supported units. When will you see the first hubs? I hope this fall. That's the intention that we're working towards. And believe me, people are working as quickly as possible. We understand. I anticipate it is going to be a challenging summer. We don't yet have the hubs in place. They're not going to come out of magic. The work has to be done to pull those pieces together. In addition to that, we recognize the pressure around encampments. An emergency meeting was held last week with a number of community leaders to begin to develop the initial plan so we can be much better coordinated and clear on the overall response to support people that are living in encampments while we look to what does the longer term support strategy look like. So people are actively engaged. The city is part of those discussions, as are a number of community health and social service leaders. I believe their next meeting is next week. So those are the things that we are doing in terms of answers to your questions about what's next, the timeline, and when do we hope to see some things in place.
Councillor Pribble, you have a little bit of time left.
Yeah, just a follow up on, so the way I'm hearing it, that the first hubs would be fall, so let's say even if it's September, if there would be certain proposals or some suggestions that from the staff that could come back to us, either the committee or I'll stick with the committee, with some initiatives, because summers are as bad as winters. You're going from -20 to +40 or whatever it is, and we will have big issues ahead of us. So if there are certain initiatives, like we had an emergency winter program, if there could be something till when you mentioned the bridge, to get over it, to buy some time and improve the situation within the next 5 months, since the first hubs are open, if some initiatives could be introduced and proposed to the committee. Thank you.
Yes, let me just say, Councillor, in my discussions with Mr. Dickens, we just received millions of dollars from the province, and that, as I said today, will be used in two ways. One is to prepare for the implementation of the hub system. The other is to deal with the situation that we know we have in the city now. Additional resources are available to us, and Mr. Dickens will be very transparent in the way that they're deployed through our regular reporting mechanism to those committees. But I can tell you the announcement today is good news for us, having some short-term resources to be able to address the gap period between now and the ramping up of the hubs. And that was, as you know, because you were there, this is a piece of that funding that we received today. I'll allow staff to add any context, but I just wanted, Mr. Dickens and I had this exact conversation, so I wanted to add that context as well. Mr. Dickens, you can add anything you'd like.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, absolutely. So as Ms. Livingston indicated, the work is happening in real time. And the work that has happened to date is pretty significant when you consider there was a severe lack of a coordinated system. And what we have now is the framework of a decision-making model, of a scope of membership, of clear-cut endorsed values and principles. We were able to get people to come together to agree on those things and move quickly on those things, recognizing the emergency that's on our streets. The complaints, the concerns, the safety issues, the encampments has been an annual challenge. Ms. Livingston has indicated it's going to be a rough summer. It's going to be rougher than most summers, but most summers are really, really rough. We get our inboxes fill up daily from members of this horseshoe with complaints, concerns about people living unsheltered. So those are not new issues. They're issues that we've been addressing for a number of years. What we're looking to do, though, is to make sure that we are making the best use of our resources in a responsible way as fast as we can. So we want to make sure that the community is able to come together, as Ms. Livingston indicated, multi-sector response to a community issue, to understand whose dollars are best spent when. Is it a front-end loaded health investment to get supportive housing off the ground? Or is it a municipal investment to do something else? Is it a provincial investment to advance on the funding that the mayor just acknowledged? So we want to make sure we're moving in a coordinated fashion, but we're moving quickly. We will be standing up the implementation tables in May. That work will be to design and confirm what we would like to see in place when it comes to housing hubs and the encampments. And we will be, as we come back on a monthly basis, providing you detailed updates on where the system is at. And we will have many opportunities to bring forward to you investment opportunities for your consideration and debate. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to the next speaker. Okay. I don't have a next speaker. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just going to offer a few thoughts, and I want to build on what you shared, what Councillor Stevenson shared, what everybody has shared on this, because one of the things that I think is really important to understand, particularly with our senior leadership team for colleagues, is they're always open to hearing our comments and feedback. So we don't necessarily have to be, and believe me, I understand the frustration too about not being in the room. That it absolutely, in this position you want to be, because ultimately the buck stops with us in terms of our constituents holding us accountable. But sometimes we do have to let go of that a little bit and put some trust and faith in folks. But that doesn't mean that their ears are closed to the input that we want to provide them too. Councillor, and I'm going to share an example. I'm going to share an example publicly, go on the record with it, because Councillor Pribble mentioned schools. And Mr. Dickens mentioned that we fill up their inboxes every day. Absolutely we do. I've done it. In fact, I did it today, again, with an encampment right on the lot line of a public school, from a complaint that I got from a principal. And I'm going to continue to forward those along, because for me, when we get to the point of setting a policy around encampments, personally, my position is going to be school zones are no-go zones. They are a zero tolerance area for encampments because we have to think about student safety there. I've shared that feedback with Mr. Dickens. The encampment, how we deal with those is still a work in progress. But I'm confident that when he's sitting at that table, he's also shared the concerns that he's getting from me and other members of council about encampments around school zones. So when that policy recommendation does come back to us, I hope and I trust that those concerns will be reflected. So while participating in the meetings might feel like there's some value to it for us, I think it's important to recognize that we are in a position where we can provide input in other avenues that aren't open to necessarily as open to the public or to agencies, because we've got that direct line of communication with the senior leadership team that we work with every day on all kinds of issues, whether it's Ms. Barbone on the budget or Mr. Mathers or Ms. McNeely on a planning issue or whatever it happens to be. In this case with encampments, it'd be Mr. Dickens. But we have an opportunity to provide not just crisis response. We don't just have to put out fires as councillors. We can also provide input that they can take into those sessions and share with our partners that, hey, you know what, councillors might have a different point of view, and I'm not sure if this policy is going to be supported by council, because what I'm hearing from councillors is this, this, and this. So I really encourage people to support our team in their work by also providing them input ourselves. It can be a word in the hallway over a coffee. It can be an email to them. But I have never had a member of our senior leadership team turn me down in terms of taking the time to listen to my input and opinion. They might not agree with me, but they take the time to listen. And yes, I did see that wink, Ms. Scher, and Ms. Scher has corrected me several times on the Ontario Roads Manual and traffic calming and those particular things. And actually, she's taught me a lot through saying, you know what, you're actually wrong on this one, and here's why. And I appreciate that, but the door is always open. So have those conversations. And certainly as we work through this process, we may find we want a more robust reporting system. We may find that we want to designate, as we do on boards, agencies, and commissions, a representative from this body to be in those discussions. But I do think we're very early on in this process moving forward. So I'm extending that trust, and I'm continuing to extend my personal opinions and feedback to our senior leadership team as we go. I just want other colleagues to know that, in my experience, their door's always been open. So we can share those thoughts with them as well.
Councillor Rahman.
Thank you. In follow-up to Deputy Mayor Lewis's comments just now, I just wanted to get a sense from a process perspective. If we did want to explore at a further date having a member of council as a representative of a working group or through this process. I'm just wondering, would that be through governance working group that we would have that conversation, or is there a need for a motion? How would we basically make that decision as a council, and what kind of decision point would we be looking for, I guess, collectively around doing that?
Sure. I have the city manager. I have clerks who can also help.
Your worship, in the next report to council, the next update, there'll be a description of the whole of community implementation framework. I think that might be an opportunity should council wish to play a different or more direct role in some elements of it. You'll see what that framework looks like and the work that is underway. That could be an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. That exhausts the speakers list. Probably we could have pulled that item maybe because we're dealing with the whole committee report with the exception of the one piece. But just before we vote, so everybody knows, you're not just voting on the thing we were talking about, but everything except for the piece that Councillor Van Meerbergen wanted dealt with separately, which is the request to governance working group. If there's no other discussion on this, I'm going to open approval of this of the SVPC report with the exception of that governance working group item for voting.
Closing the vote, motion carries 14-0.
And just so colleagues know, Councillor Pelosi was with us. She's dropped off. Why there's only 14 votes at this time. Go back to the Deputy Mayor on the remaining item on the committee agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Recognizing that if we had pulled 2.1 anyway, I would have still been standing that whole time. I am now happy to put item 9, the request to the governance working group meeting, on the floor.
Okay, that's on the floor. I know one councillor member wanted to vote separately on this. Is there any discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, we're going to open that for voting.
Councillor Ferreira.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 13-1.
And that completes the 14th report of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee.
I need a volunteer. Councillor Rahman. I like everybody looked the other way when I said that. So that concludes our regular committee reports. There will be 2 other added reports, but first we're going to do the report out of council in closed session. I have Councillor Rahman who will read out our report from some of the decisions we've made in closed session.
Okay, thank you. 7th report of council in closed session, your council in closed session report. Item 1, property disposition, city-owned surplus land, part of 181 Hamilton Road, that on the recommendation of the Deputy City Manager, Finance supports on the advice of the Director Realty Services with respect to the city-owned surplus land located at 181 Hamilton Road, City of London, County Middlesex, being part of Lot 28, South, or S, Hamilton Road, Northeast, Gray Street, PL 178, in brackets E, being part of PIN number 083130062, particularly described as Part 2, Plan 33R-21427, as shown on the location map, the agreement of purchase and sale, the agreement as submitted by the Thames Valley District School Board, the purchaser to purchase the subject property from the city at the purchase price of $190,000 be accepted, subject to the terms and conditions set out in the agreement. Item 2, partial property acquisition, 300 Clark Road, future road widening and improvements, that on the recommendation of the Deputy City Manager, Finance supports on the advice of the Director, Realty Services with respect to the property located at 300 Clark Road, further described as Part Lot 4, Concession C, being part of PIN 08128-1980 in the city of London, Middlesex County, containing an area of approximately 10,791 square feet, as shown on the location map, for the purpose of future road improvements and cycling facilities. The following action be taken. A, the offer submitted by Thames Valley District School Board, the vendor, to sell the subject property to the city for the sum of $216,000 be accepted, subject to the terms and conditions as set out in the agreement. And B, the financing of this acquisition be approved as set out in the source of financing report.
Okay, and I assume you're willing to move those motions?
Yes, I'm moving those. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Trossau. Any discussion on the report out from in camera and the items that are before us today? Okay, we'll open that for voting.
Pelosi votes yes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, colleagues, we have two added reports from special committee meetings yesterday. The first is the 8th report of the Special Corporate Services Committee meeting. It's a one-item report with debenture issuance, so I'll go to Deputy Mayor to move the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm happy to move the 8th report of the Corporate Services Committee, the special meeting regarding debenture issuance.
Okay, that's on the floor. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Pelosi votes yes.
Councillor Hopkins?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
The other added report is the 7th report of Civic Works Committee. I'll go to Councillor Rahman to present that report. It's also a one-item agenda.
Thank you. I will put on the floor the 7th special meeting which was the 7th of Civic Works Committee. We dealt with one item 2.1, which was the updates of the blue box transition. I'm putting those items on the floor. It was to provide the Deputy City Manager, Environment and Infrastructure with delegated authority through Appendix A and B.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting in the system as well.
Pelosi votes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, that brings us to the end of added reports. There are no deferred matters. Any inquiries? I see no inquiries. There are no emergent motions. That means we move on to bylaws. We have all of the bylaws that are in your package. I'll note that one in there, number 123, says on added bylaw list, that is the bylaw associated with debentures that we just, from the special committee report that we just approved. There's also, based on our in-camera report out, additional bylaws 139 to 143, which relate to those additional matters which came out of closed session. Does anybody want any bylaws dealt with separately, or can we deal with all of it together? Anybody want something dealt with separately? I'll just give you a second just to make sure. No? Okay, then I'm going to look for a motion for first reading on all of the bylaws, including the additional ones. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry, Councillor Van Meerbergen. You want something dealt with separately?
No, Mayor, I was going to move it. Move the bylaws.
Well, that's even better. You're the mover. I'll look for a seconder. I see Councillor Hillier. It's a double online move and second. That's great. There is no debate during first reading, so we'll open first reading for voting of all of the bylaws, including the additional ones.
Pelosi votes yes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
All right, second reading, looking for a mover, seconder. Moved by Counselor Hopkins, seconded by Counselor Lehman. Any debate on second reading? Okay, seeing none, we'll open that for voting.
Pelosi votes yes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
Okay, third reading of all of the bylaws, including the additional ones that came out of our in-camera session. Mover, Counselor McAllister, seconder, Counselor Cuddy. There is no discussion on third reading, so we'll open that for voting.
Pelosi votes yes.
Closing the vote, motion carries 15-0.
With that, we've concluded the bylaw. We have left is a motion to adjourn, moved by Counselor Frank, seconded by Counselor Rahman. This is by hand. All those in favor of adjournment?
That motion carries.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned. I'll be back on Friday. I'll be in Ottawa. We'll see you when I get back.